In the last video, we talked about rivers and how they travel downhill, usually from mountains or hills to the sea. They have to travel downhill because that's how water flows. It follows gravity. But where do lakes come from? How do lakes fit into this? Well, let's look at that. Lakes tell you something about your topography of your map in the same way that rivers tell you something about it. If you have a river, let's say we have some mountains. Let's draw some quick mountains here. You got a river flowing out of it, and then it turns into a lake. What does that tell us? It tells us that the river is flowing downhill. This is the path of least resistance. And then it's stopped here. Why would water simply stop? Well, the answer is that it's flowing into a large basin or valley, right? All this is land sloping down, if you can kind of imagine that. So it's found a low point. And instead of being able to just flow down here and continue out towards the sea, it just begins filling up an area. That's what lakes are. Lakes are just low points that are being filled up by water. And if that's the case, then lakes tend to be a low point in the surrounding area, right? You may have other mountains nearby, and this is simply a low point, in which case you will tend to have other rivers also flowing in that direction. Just as rivers usually flow towards the sea, if they're near a lake, they'll tend to flow towards the lake because the lake will tend to be a lower point. This is a generalization, of course, but it tends to be true. And you'll have little networks of rivers and streams going out like this too. Right. All flowing towards the lake. Now what's happening? It depends how big the lake is. If the lake is really huge, like say it's, I don't know, the Caspian Sea or something, then it might actually turn into a sea, right? It's so big that all the water flows into it and just stays there. The evaporation process off the top of the lake is enough to absorb all the water going into it, and its level stays roughly the same. You see this sometimes with really large lakes. On the other hand, if it's not a very big lake, then what's going to happen is that as the water flows into it, it's inevitably going to fill up. The water level is going to rise, and it's going to spill over its banks in the direction, over the bank that's the lowest, right? Because it's going to follow the path of least resistance. So if this is, say, this is the lowest point, all these edges are higher up, maybe there's sort of like hills around here. This is the lowest point. The water spills over the edge and continues on. And then you might find situations where it encounters another low point, forms another lake, fills up that lake, and then spills out and continues on in another direction. So sometimes you end up with lake systems where you have a river flowing along and then sort of turning into more than one lake as it goes downhill. And these look really interesting. They look kind of fun. And again, they tell you a lot about the landscape, that you have an area that's in general going downhill, but is filled with valleys that all these sort of cascading rivers are slowly filling up. I don't know if you can hear in the background, there's a lot of kids out in the street shouting their heads off. Getting fresh air, unlike me. So you can have situations like that. Again, but they're still flowing from uphill to the downhill. And if they're big enough, then they can stay where they are on their own, but if they're small enough, they will overflow and continue their journey. So those are some basic principles for lakes. If you follow those, then your lakes and river systems will look more natural and more plausible. All right, add a comment below if you found this helpful or any techniques that you have. Like and subscribe, and thank you for watching. I'll see you later.